Yes, indeed, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the First Class, Second Place podcast. I'm your host, Jason Enrique, and with me today, I have a very, very, very special guest with me today. I'm actually really excited for this one. I've been looking forward to this one for a long time. I have right now with me the co-founder of Purple Cloud Entertainment, Matt Provenzano. How you doing, Matt?
I'm doing very well. I love the sound effects. This is awesome. It's so cool.
Yeah, well, listen, I'll tell you one thing that is really awesome is your podcast, but we're going to get to that in a little bit.
Okay.
But let me start off the show with the question that I ask everybody that comes onto the show. Please tell me the beginning of your New York story, meaning like where were you born and raised and what was your upbringing like?
Sure, yeah. I was born in Staten Island, New York, which, contrary to popular belief, is part of New York. A lot of people don't know that.
Yeah, they do call it the Forgotten Borough, right?
Exactly,
Okay.
yeah. There's the 5 boroughs, and then a lot of people just kind of leave off Staten Island. But yeah, I was born and raised Staten Island, and that was what, when I was a kid, I just thought that was New York, right? I didn't really understand that there was other parts of it, like Manhattan and the Bronx and everything.
Right.
It was only when I started to get older that I realized there was more than just Staten Island.
You know, I think that's all of us as a kid at one point. I mean, I remember when I was a kid growing up in North Jersey, my world was very limited to like my neighborhood, and then what really got me to notice that there's a much bigger world out there is when when I fell in love with movies. Like I've been a movie guy all my life. It really started when my father got that black box illegal cable, and we got like every pay-per-view channel, including channels that we're not allowed to watch when we're kids. Yeah. So, but that's kind of pretty much what opened my eyes. And then he would take me to the Yankee games all the time. But as far as like Staten Island, I mean, it's known as the Forgotten Borough. Now, it's funny. It's interesting about Staten Island because it's always, considered the Forgotten Borough, but there's also been a plethora of really talented people to come out. I mean, obviously you have Wu-Tang Clan. I'm a huge Wu-Tang fan.
Yeah.
You have Pete Davidson, who's arguably the most popular Staten Islander at the moment.
Yeah.
Colin Jost, the Impractical Jokers, Matt Provenzano, amongst others, But, why do you think that, and you probably answered this a million times, but just to my audience and also to myself, why do you think that it gets such a bad rap?
It gets a bad rep. So I'll say that it gets a bad reputation, and I totally understand why. It's not one of those things where it's like, I don't get it. People hate on it. I totally understand why. It's only in the last 15, 20 years that people have started to see that, there's a little bit of good in Staten Island. There's some good people if you just look for it.
Okay.
I mean, in my opinion, it's like Staten Island offers the best of what New York has to offer. Like there's a little bit of every borough. You just have to look for it. But I think that it's mainly the people in Staten Island. That's the reason why it gets the reputation it does. Pete Davidson described it once perfectly, and I don't think I have a better explanation, which is that it's as if you took a time machine back to 1980 and everything, it's just a bunch of Italian restaurants, everyone's stuck in their ways. And he said it's adorable and sad. And I can't think of a better way to describe it, because you talk to the average Staten Islander and they're just, it's really like they just never grew up past 1990. With
right.
certain viewpoints and everything, then it's just, so I get it. I mean, if you search Staten Island on Reddit, you'll get a lot of fun facts about how it was started, and then all of the comments were like, okay, yeah, but we'll give it back to Jersey. Like, we don't want it anymore.
I mean, we looked up, a lot of New Yorkers, especially from the main 5 boroughs, they look at Jersey to a certain extent as the way of Staten Island as well. I mean, we're frowned upon according to them as well. So I feel your pain in some aspects. It just sucks that you guys are, you guys literally are a part of New York.
Right. And I think that a lot of people forget that. A lot of people gleefully forget that. They don't want to be remembered about
right.
Staten Island. But it's just, I mean, it's like everywhere. There's civic pride, there's civic rivalry. And it's just, it's not super important when you get into, it's just like, it's traditional ancient stuff.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, of course, there's a rivalry between New York and New Jersey, but it's really not. I think it's mostly in jest. Like if you really look at it, if the average New Yorker meets the average Jerseyan, what do you call people?
New Jerseyans is fine.
New Jerseyans? Yeah. If those two people meet, then they won't have a problem with each other.
Right.
It's like Yankees, Mets. I'm not a sports guy, but it's
right.
It's like that. It's just.
I hear you. Yeah. Now it's ironic that you said that you're not a sports guy, and the reason I say that is because I mentioned to you a little earlier that you're not the first Staten Islander on my show before. I've had Kenny in Staten Island, Ira from Staten Island. Very popular Jet fans, especially in those circles. I've also had John Jastrzemski, who's another sports figure. But I guess, I'm not from Staten Island, obviously. I'm a Jersey guy, but I'm a Jet fan. So is there a healthy a number of Jet fans out there, or is that just a mirage or anything?
I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know. Because I'm sure there are. I'm so outside of the sports realm that I could be surrounded by, like, Derek Jeter can walk in front of me and I would never know. I'm so outside of that world.
Fair enough.
And I wish that I knew a little bit more about it so I could be a more worldly person. But it's just, I don't know.
It's never too late to learn, and that doesn't cast a shadow of who you are anyway. At the end. I mean, everybody's different. You have your thing. You have film. You have entertainment. You know what you like. I'm just a happen guy that has an unhealthy obsession with sports in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, and I was talking to my brother about it recently, and we were talking about how neither one of us are sports fans, and I said I think the older I got, the more I realized that there's the difference between the type of person that says, I'm not into that, but of course, no disrespect to people who are, like, that's your thing. And then there's the people who make that their personality, where it's like, I don't know anything about sports because sports is stupid, and I know, and they're happy with it. Like that shouldn't be something that you're proud of. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but at the same time, I will admit that there is some sport fans out there that they revolve that around their entire life.
Yeah.
And you could just see how miserable they are. So maybe in some kind of way, it's a good thing that you're not too much into sports, especially being a New Yorker, because as of late, we don't really have anything to be proud of.
I'm not a sports fan, and even I know that's funny.
There you go. It transcends. But speaking of Pete Davidson, what we just talked about earlier, in doing my research, I saw he said somewhere in an interview, I forget what show it was, but he said that to him the best pizza in all of New York is L&B's in Brooklyn. But he also said that if you go to any place, a pizza place in Staten Island, you're pretty much good. Would you concur on that, or any favorite pizza spots that you recommend?
I agree with the latter half of that sentence. I think if you go anywhere on Staten Island for pizza, you're going to be okay. Mm-hmm. I think L&B in Brooklyn I'd put it in the top 15 pizza places, but my personal favorite, I think anywhere on Staten, there's like very specific places on Staten Island. My personal favorite is Lee's Tavern. Okay. And that's a place that they don't even have signage. They just don't give a shit. They're just like, because they have a core audience that comes in.
You know what? I did remember a Lee's Tavern when I had John Jastrzemski on my show. I think I mentioned that to him as well.
Really?
So, yeah.
Yeah, Lee's Tavern is the shit. I've been going there since I was a kid. Nice. And then there's Danino's. There's Cafe Luna. I love pizza so much. I've been to every pizza place on Staten Island.
Nice.
Just because I wanted to, there's like Tortuno's in Manhattan. I'm always trying to find better pizza, and I think that it can't get any better than Lee's Tavern.
Well, this is a nice well, this is also a nice segue because I wanted to talk about Purple Cloud Entertainment, your company, and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. As I said, I do my research, and I've happened to catch a lot of, if not all of, what Purple Cloud has had to offer on YouTube, where everybody can check it out right now. That was a really funny skit about two mobsters trying to be aggressive in making a pizza and everything. That was you also, right?
That was me.
Yeah. Yes. Where did the idea, like, before I ask you that question, mm-hmm. I found the best way that I could describe the projects that you guys have done on Purple Cloud is oddly interesting.
Okay.
Oddly entertaining because, well, first and foremost, I got to ask, where does the name Purple Cloud come from? I mean, is it pretty obvious to, what kind of things you might be partaking, or?
Yeah, so I started Purple Cloud Entertainment with my buddy Michael Robert Anderson, where we both share a love of cinema and just making things. It's not even about making movies, it's just about making anything,
Right.
Like just telling stories and making art. And so when we were trying to settle on a name, we realized that most people, especially in our circle on mm-hmm. Staten Island, in the tri-state area, New York in general, if they're making a production company, they would name it after a phrase. Like, that's a rap production, or I don't know, like Check the Gate Productions. And
that makes sense, yeah.
And it's like, there's nothing wrong with that, but it's just so dime a dozen. And so we were thinking about companies like Universal and Paramount and 20th Century Fox, and we realized how mostly the traditional classic film studios,
the big conglomerate ones.
Exactly. They all share this theme that the name reflects something bigger than you, like something that's above you, something that you could never really touch or grasp.
That is true. I mean, Paramount, Universal. I mean, those two right there. That sounds like colossal. You know, so.
It's like something otherworldly. So we were trying to think of a name, and we were something about clouds. We thought of like Beyond Entertainment and things like that. And both of our favorite colors are purple. Someone said purple cloud at some point, and we just said, yeah, that's a good one. We'll keep it on the back burner. And we spent weeks just wrestling with other titles. And finally, I texted Mike, and I still have this text. I said, Mike, and he said, yeah. And I said, fuck it. It's Purple Cloud.
Okay.
And he said, are you sure? And I said, yeah, I already made the logo. It's Purple Cloud.
Nice.
So that's how it started.
All right. Well, hey, listen, sometimes I've learned in life that sometimes you just got to say fuck it.
Yeah, exactly. And we're thinking too much about it.
Right. You know, and just, you know, you like you said yourself, you just put it on the back burner, but at the end of the day, it was right in front of your face the whole time.
Right. Exactly.
And I'm pretty sure you've been happy with it ever since.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
There you go. Yeah. But yeah, no, I got to say, like, there's been a lot of pretty interesting projects that you had on that YouTube channel, but I would have to think that my real favorite one was Divine Intervention.
Oh, thank you.
That was actually I was laughing so hard. I never thought in my life that I would find Matt Provenzano as the voice of God to be the funniest fucking thing I've heard in a long time. That was you, by the way, as your voice.
That was me.
The voice of God.
Yes.
Oh my God. I don't think, ladies and gentlemen, I implore to go on Purple Cloud Entertainment on YouTube. Look up the short film Divine Intervention, and the only thing that I will say is that God is proof that sense of humor is a real thing. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, that was that started. I was taking the train. I had a job in Manhattan, so I was commuting every day, and then I found myself in a lot of positions where I was sitting on the train or the ferry, the Staten Island ferry, or the subway or something, and there was like a girl sitting across from me, and I was single at the time, so I thought, what would it be like if I just went over and started talking? I mean, there's an unwritten rule in the morning commute that you don't talk to anybody. You play your Nintendo Switch, you listen to music, you do not say a word. But I was like, what would happen if I spoke to someone, you know, just maybe I'd make a new friend. I don't know.
Yeah.
And then there was always that thing in your mind, like, just don't do it. Leave them alone. They don't want to talk to you. And so I just thought, what if I've got a phone call right now from a higher power just telling me to just do it. But not like in an inspirational way, in a condescending way.
Yeah.
It's like, you little wimp, just do it.
Yeah, you fucking pussy, just go talk to her, you know?
Exactly. And so so originally that was that took place, I wrote it to be on a subway train. And then I realized how hard that is to actually shoot. So that my parents run a bakery in Staten Island called The Sweet Life.
Yeah. Okay. Shout out to Sweet Life Bakery.
Shout out to Sweet Life. Go to, I think it's sweetlifebakeshopsi.com. I could be wrong. But just look up the Sweet Life Bake Shop. It's good pastries. I recommend the homemade
Matter of
pop-tarts.
fact, on Divine Intervention, they actually have a promo for there. That's where you can look up the website as well.
Yes, there you go. Excellent.
Right. Yeah, so don't trust us. Trust the video.
Trust the video. And so, so I rewrote it to work in a bakery, and then we shot it over, I think that was 3 days. And that was a lot of fun. That was like, I mean, like you said, Purple Cloud Entertainment is oddly interesting, and I like that you said that, because I think my style and Mike's style, because we both make things for the channel and for the company. My style is way more embracing absurdity. So everything that I do, there's a lot of silliness in most of the stories that I tell, but it's in the context of the story. It's okay with me. I'm accepting it.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that's what Divine Intervention is, and that's especially what the ending of that film is.
Yeah.
Which I won't spoil. It just goes off the rails. It goes bananas, and I love that. My whole thing is about how crazy can this go. And you have to be able to defend those decisions to people who disagree with it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
I mean, that's perfect, because when I saw it, I thought it was like, oh, wow, this is a nice story, and I like how it's making me laugh and everything. But the end is like, I did not expect that turn out. But I loved it at the same time, because it still encapsulated what you guys do as far as your style, for lack of a better term.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. So, there was a time in my life where I wanted to be a filmmaker, and who knows, maybe it might still be a dream in the future. It's never too late. That's one of the things I've also learned in life. It's just not the time yet right now, or it hasn't happened. But I would say that my real first realization that maybe I wanted to be a director or a filmmaker when I was young is the first movie that I saw ever that made me click it in my head was the movie Die Hard with a Vengeance.
Oh, yeah.
So that's personally my favorite out of all Die Hard movies. And matter of fact, me and Marv once had a debate about if Die Hard is a Christmas movie or not. You guys can check that out on YouTube, on Bravery Studios on YouTube.
Bravery.
So But with that being said, are there any filmmaker heroes that you have, or was there one movie that made you decide that, you know what, that's what I want to do with my life?
Yes. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited that you asked me that question because now I get to talk about movies.
Yeah.
It was my favorite thing in life.
Yeah, well, then I think that we could become best friends in that aspect. But
Fuck yeah,
continue,
man.
yeah.
So when I was a kid, I knew that I liked to make things, but I didn't know about movies, so to speak. Like I knew that movies existed. I didn't know that people had jobs making movies.
Mm-hmm.
So then my mom got me a camera, and I just started making little skits in my room. I like to make people laugh.
Mm-hmm.
I like to get that easy reaction out of people because if you make something interesting, there's no telling if they like it or not.
Right.
But as a kid, if you make someone laugh, you remember that. And so then I started watching. I learned from this guy on YouTube named James Rolfe, and he was a cinephile.
Okay.
And he would describe how when he was a kid he would make movies. And I actually remembered. I remembered the thought in my head when I heard him say that was there are more people that do this. I really thought I was the only person. Like I make movies in my room. There are other people. I thought everyone else just plays video games. I didn't know people do this. And so from that moment on, I must have been like 7 or 8. I wanted to do whatever he said was interesting. And so then he started promoting movies that he liked. And so whatever movie any movie of the week that he would say to check out, I would check out. And from there, then I was introduced to the directors and all the movies that would then inspire me. So it started with James Rolfe, but then it switched to, I watched The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly at like 10 years old.
Great movie, phenomenal movie.
It's one of the greatest things ever, not just a movie. It's like a phenomenal piece of art.
Absolutely.
And I watched it at like 10 years old, and it's a 3-hour Western, and I was enthralled the entire time. I actually remember watching the ending face-off that's like 7 minutes long with my jaw dropped. At 10 years old, I'm just watching it like this is insane.
The tension in that scene is palpable. I mean, it's crazy.
Unmatched. Still to this day, I haven't seen anything like it.
And that came out in like, what, in the 50s, 60s, 70s?
64, I believe.
64. See, yeah, you're much more of a historian than I am. But just realize that was made in 64. We're in 2023 now. And I find it very seldom to find a film that has that kind of tension at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially a Western, but
Yeah.
I think the only thing that matches are other Westerns made by Sergio Leone, which is, Once Upon a Time in the West and things like that.
Yes.
I think not to go off on a tangent, but I think the introduction of the villain in Once Upon a Time in the West might be in the top 10 greatest film scenes ever made. It's amazing because it's played by, what the hell is this? I forget his name. Henry Fonda, thank you. And
Thank you,
Henry,
Marv.
at that time,
Can we get a ding for that, please?
Henry Fonda was known for playing only heroes at that time. So everyone just knew, if you saw Henry Fonda, if you saw those beautiful eyes, it's like, oh, he's going to be the hero. He's going to say something inspiring. It'll be a feel-good movie. And then he was promoted to be in this film, so everyone knew he was going to be in Once Upon a Time in the West. And then suddenly, no one knew who he was going to be. And then, if you haven't seen, to the audience, if you haven't seen this scene, just go on YouTube and watch it. It's amazing. There's a family with children, and they all get murdered off screen by guns. And suddenly, this beautiful score starts playing from Ennio Morricone, and then this
R.I.P.
Yeah, and he was one of the greats too.
Yeah.
And this villainous group that you don't see their faces of 7 people, they walk on to the reservation. You still don't see their face, and then it builds and it builds, and it shows the main guy, the back of his head, and then the camera slowly pans around, and it shows that it's Henry Fonda who just shot this entire family and murdered them. And in that moment, and again, that's even where we're talking about film scenes that haven't been matched. I can't imagine doing that today. I mean, if I don't know, Tom Hanks. If you cast him as a villain and show that he just murdered an entire family, but that's the twist. That's because the director expects the audience to know that this person usually plays heroes. Yeah.
Well, the same thing kind of happened with Denzel Washington when he did Training Day. I mean, he was known to play good guy roles, and then he plays a crooked cop. And not only did he play him, but he did it fucking phenomenally to the point where he even won an Oscar for it. But it's debatable whether they only gave it to him because of his clout or whatever. But but that's a great point though, because I remember when I saw Training Day in theaters, I was under the impression that he's just playing a badass cop, but he's doing right by the law. Then I turned out he's a fucking corrupt piece of shit, but he did it amazing.
Right. And I think from there, just to like wrap up, because I want to make sure I answered your question.
Right.
From there, I got something like I watched Back to the Future, which now still remains my favorite film of all time.
Yeah, it's definitely in my top 5 for sure.
It's amazing. And I remember watching it as a kid, and I didn't know anything about it. And the one thing that it was the first time I respected a storytelling technique, a piece of filmmaking. Because if you know the movie, it's in the beginning, Marty's in 1980, and someone comes at him with a flyer to save the clock tower. And then because it was struck by lightning 30 years ago, and then his girlfriend writes her number on it.
1985, actually.
What did I say?
1980.
Oh, I'm sorry, 1985. Okay. And she, his girlfriend writes her number on it and says, "I love you." Then everything happens. He gets transferred back to 1955. He meets a young Doc Brown, and he says, like, "I have to get back. I have a girlfriend." And he says, "Is she pretty? Like, does she like you?"
She's beautiful.
Yeah, Doc, she's beautiful. And then he shows her the number that she likes him. And then Doc says, the only way we can get back to the future and generate that enough electricity is with a bolt of lightning. But we don't know when and where something's going to strike.
We do now.
And then he shows the flyer.
Yeah.
And I remember watching that at, I don't know, 11 or 12 years old. And at that age, I thought, that's fucking cool. I like that they did that. That's really clever. And that was the first time that
I see what you did there.
I love these sound effects so much.
Yeah, Marv is the man, man. Shout out to you, Marv. Shout out to you, Bravery. Happy to be part of the fold and everything.
For sure, man.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Back to the Future and those things like that inspired me. And then I found out about people like Steven Spielberg and Alfred Hitchcock, and I realized how they just exuded storytelling and filmmaking, and I just thought, I want to be that.
Yeah.
That's what I looked at as an inspiration.
Right. And I guess that now you can kind of say that about me if I ever have, if I actually make these dreams of being a director ever happen. But I know that for me, initially when it started, especially once I mentioned with Die Hard 3, it was all about I wanted to show like some of the best spectacular action scenes that you could see in a movie, like whether it's explosions, car chases, whatever.
Right.
Not to the extent of Michael Bay, but more like James Cameron.
Yes.
That type of thing. But yeah, we could talk about movies all day, every day. I could see where this is going off. We're going off on a tangent as well, but I love it, I appreciate it, and I respect it. But let's also get down to the real deal, the reason why you are here on First Class Second Place, and that is a masterpiece that you created by the name of Jocks.
A masterpiece is stretching it slightly.
I think
it's a strong word.
All right, well, at the end of the day, art is subjective. So I consider it a fucking masterpiece.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
No, so the name of the podcast is Jocks, The Rise and Fall of Opie and Anthony. Now, let me tell you about how I discovered this podcast.
Okay.
So one of the most unpopular things about me is that I actually am a fan of Carlos Mencia. I'm a comedy guy. I've been to comedy clubs all the time and everything. I love underground. I love the big ones and so on and so forth. So I unpopularly am a fan of Carlos Mencia, and I remember doing this. I was going down this rabbit hole of him versus Joe Rogan, and there was this podcast by the name of Why Are You Laughing, taken from Patrice O'Neill, I know who's your favorite comedian.
Yeah.
So they were talking about the whole history about what happened between them and everything, and they also had an episode of Opie and Anthony when it came to the whole Sex for Sam 3 debacle.
Right.
And I thought it was really interesting. And I thought to myself, I never got into Opie and Anthony. It's not that I have anything against him. It's that I was just a Howard Stern fan. And anybody knows that if you're a Howard Stern fan, he made you hate everybody else.
Right.
So, but I was thinking to myself, I know that Opie and Anthony had a bunch of these comedians that I like. And let me check out some things. Let me see if there's any podcasts out there on them, like maybe some old archive episodes or whatever. So I type in Opie and Anthony on the podcast website, and the only thing that popped up was Jocks. And then I clicked on it, and I'm looking at like, what's this, and like, this looks pretty interesting. And I like the fact that you had an episode dedicated to Patrice O'Neill, who I think is another amazing, fantastic
all-timer.
Yeah. So I decided to give it a listen. And after I got to the first episode, I was hooked. I could not stop listening to it. I thought it was riveting. I was fascinated by the story itself, because it's a crazy fucking story of how the whole thing transpired and how it ended, unfortunately. But what I took about it mostly, besides the story, was from a technical standpoint, I thought you did phenomenal, man. I mean, I thought that you really did your research, you did your homework.
Oh my God! Wow!
Wow, where did that come from?
So I was thinking that's the relevance.
I know, but either way, I was just really, I was really amazed about how much you did your research and everything. It was very well made. I highly recommend anybody, even if you're not an Opie and Anthony fan, just hearing the story about it is just fascinating. And I think this guy did a phenomenal job doing everything. Now I know that it didn't come out perfectly the way you wanted to. There was just little tidbits here, like you wish you could have used the original theme song, and you forgot a bit with Jim Norton saying "Baby Boy" that you couldn't find until after you already published it, and so on and so forth.
Right.
But I guess I want to just start from the beginning, and you probably talked about this a million times already, but I just wanted to know, like, how is it that you decided to do a podcast on specifically Opie and Anthony?
That was an idea that was in my notes for years because I followed the trajectory and the downfall of Opie and Anthony live. So I remember reading on the news that about Anthony's tweets and that he was fired, and then what happened, and then they split. And after that, I was just fascinated, like, what's going to happen now? So I followed them along that whole journey, and I watched Opie and Jim form their show, Anthony form his. I watched the fights happen live, and then Jim and Opie split, and then Opie got fired for taking a fucking video of rolling on the toilet. And it's just, I was fascinated by it. And I remember telling all of my friends and just telling everybody that would listen or that wouldn't listen. And I realized that nobody really knew about this at all. I mean, only like diehard Opie and Anthony fans knew. There was an Opie and Anthony subreddit that was disbanded years ago. It no longer exists. But so, of course, they knew. But like the general public didn't know about this. And it's fascinating. Yeah. I mean, if you talk about the Beatles breaking up, most people know. Even if they don't know the full story, they know that the Beatles broke up, and they know that Yoko had something to do with it. And it's just juicy. It's drama. It's something. And I thought, this is really, I mean, I love what the show was in the 2000s, and it's somewhat important to me. So I have to tell this story. I can't just keep telling my friends about this. They don't want to listen anymore. So
I know the feeling, not to cut you off, but I know the feeling when I try to talk to my friends about something that I'm passionate about, and they look at me like, okay, that's great.
Oh my God. It happens like once every day in my life.
Yeah. So I understand where you're coming from, but yeah, please continue.
Yeah. So I had it in my notes. I thought documentary about Opie and Anthony. I thought that's pretty cool. I'll do something with that eventually. And then I struggled to think about how I would do it, because obviously Opie and Anthony is an audio medium. It's not visual. So what like, I'm telling the story, but am I just gonna show a slideshow of pictures while they're talking? Yeah. And so then I got a job in the city. I'll keep this brief because I've explained. I mean, that I've explained it on the on other podcasts.
Yeah. Shout out to West Coast Radio, by the way.
Yes, that was a lot of fun to do that. And so I got a job in the city. I started my commute, so I needed things to listen to, and I got into the world of podcasting. And up until that point, what I thought podcasting was more like this.
Yeah.
Like two people sitting in a room talking. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and so I didn't realize that a podcast could just be a film or a documentary just with no visuals, like Serial or S-Town or
Slow Burn.
Slow Burn's a great one.
Yeah. And
so I wanted to get into that world. Whenever I'm interested in something, I need to be a part of it somehow. Like I read an autobiography a few months ago, and then I thought, oh, I'm pretty interesting. I can write a book about myself. Like I always want to get into the thing that I'm interested in.
Yeah.
So I wanted to get into podcasting, and I wanted to tell a story, and I knew that I could, and I remembered that I had that Opie and Anthony idea, and I thought that is perfect because it's just audio.
Yeah.
So I started. I mean, I was a video editor for a show on NBC, and while I was in the city, I was typing up the script and doing research when I should have been working. But I just had to tell the story, and it took I started it in 2018, and it released in the summer of 2020.
Okay, yeah, and and I'm pretty sure that the reception behind it has been phenomenal. I mean, it definitely not only got you on the show, but it released back then in 2019. You said
summer of 2020.
Summer 2020. Excuse me.
No worries.
And but I can imagine that the feedback that you've been getting on it has been tremendous. I mean, because I try to put myself into your shoes, and I was thinking to myself, man, first of all, let me ask you, how long was the production? Because I feel like you must have gone through millions and millions of hours of tape and YouTube videos, and to basically edit the parts and find the right dialogue that you wanted to put in these episodes.
Oh yeah, I mean, it helped that I religiously listened to my favorite Opie and Anthony clips.
Yeah.
So I knew where to get specific sections that I
Gotcha.
wanted. But things like Sex for Sam or
The dead mayor.
the Dead May or the Homeless Charlie bit,
Yeah.
things like that, I knew about it, but I never researched it more than the average, like a Wikipedia page.
Gotcha.
So, you're right. I had to listen to many, many, many hours of that show, and what it came down to was I would just download a shitload of Opie and Anthony clips and episodes. I would put them all in Premiere, in Adobe Premiere, my editing software, and then I would just listen to it on double speed, just to hear the basics of like what they're saying, and then at the same, I would like while I'm listening, I would play a game or something until I'm waiting for the right clip. I'm like, oh, he just said it, perfect, and then I would clip that out.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, no, I had to. I never expected my life to revolve around Opie and Anthony as much as it does.
Yeah, but answer me this though. Like, when did you actually start? Like, from what month and year to like how long did the process take you?
Oh, so that was let's see, probably I would say winter of 2018. I started in, I'm going to say November 2018, and then that was all writing and researching. And forming a basic treatment, like, okay, this episode I'm going to talk about this, and then maybe is it going to be episodic? It'll just be one thing, maybe it'll be, and forming all of those things. And then it took about like half a year straight of writing the script and refining it and making sure every detail's correct, which, by the way, a lot of comments will gleefully point out that I did not do a good job in certain points. Like Patrice O'Neill was not 41 when he came on the show. Anthony Cumia was not impersonating Robin Quivers when he went on Howard Stern's show. There's details that I got wrong, and I don't know why I didn't do more research.
There was also one that kind of stuck out to me, like, and maybe you could correct me on this. Was it that they actually did Sirius XM in the morning and then they went to terrestrial in the afternoon? Because I kind of feel like that didn't make sense, because you said where they go across the street and do it in the afternoon where they could just say whatever they want uncensored.
Yeah, that may have been another mistake.
Okay.
and to this day I still don't know the specifics. I think it might have just been flipped.
Just flipped. Okay.
And I wrote. It's one of those things that I wrote, and then I never thought that I needed to give it a second thought. Yeah. So I just up until I wrote it, and then 6 months later I narrated it, and I didn't even think about it. It's like, yeah, this is true because I wrote it. I didn't. Of course, I did all my research, and then So there are. It's not like 100%. There, I got little mistakes in there, but just it was a lot of work.
You know what? Sometimes there's movies out there, some of our favorite movies that have goofs in them that you could see, like little Easter eggs in here and there. So but actually, there was actually one little bit of I'll call it a happy mistake, or if we want to call it that. But there was one part of the one of the episodes where you were talking about how Opie's podcast on YouTube is not very well liked. Like the dislikes are much bigger than the likes.
Yeah.
And you said that one of the top comments was, "This stinks and I don't like it." But when you said that, you said it with a little chuckle, and I was thinking to myself, you're recording a professional podcast, but even you couldn't help but not laugh at that own comment. Like, did you notice that as well?
I did notice it, and I was going to re-record it, but then I thought, this is really funny.
But I loved it because it actually made me laugh. I mean, you're doing a serious project and you're taking it seriously, but you just had a little bit of a Freudian slip there.
Because it's just, how could you not laugh at that?
Yeah.
It's like someone like Opie, who's at this point probably in his 60s. He was in his 50s when he's making these YouTube videos, and he's like releasing something every day thinking, oh, I'm a radio personality. I'm just as big as Howard Stern. Everyone loves me. And then he releases it only to be met with, this stinks and I don't like it.
Yeah.
To be met with a Jim Norton quote from the first Spider-Man, because that's where that comes from.
Yeah, I remember that. I didn't put the two together, but now you just fucking blew my mind with that. Yeah. But here's the interesting thing though, and I feel like I want to ask you this because, like I said, I never got a chance to listen to Opie and Anthony back in the day, but. The internet just really, really hates Opie. And I can understand in some aspects why, because of the way he came across and how he kind of like, destroyed the friendships and so on and so forth.
Right.
But it's kind of odd to me that, how is it that Anthony Cumia is not even more despised? Because I understand that he's a funny guy and he's talented and everything, and I don't want to spend too much time on this taboo subject, but the fact of the matter is, it's hard to debate that he is not prejudiced or racist or anything like that, but yet he seems to be a little bit more well-liked than Opie. I mean, why is it that Anthony isn't the most reviled one, since he's actually shown a real ugliness inside him?
I'll tell you exactly why. It's because like Opie and Anthony fans, like the stands of Opie and Anthony that will never leave that alone. Even they hate Opie, but they love Anthony and they love Jim. They'll never turn away from them. So and that's who Anthony's core audience is the people who liked the show for Anthony, but nobody liked the show for Opie. And so Opie, the only attention that Opie gets is from the people who hate him. The only attention that Anthony gets is from the people who love him.
Right.
So if either one of them were household names, which they aren't. I mean, they had a huge show that I love very much.
Right.
But Opie and Anthony's they're not Howard Stern. Everyone knows Howard Stern, but a quarter of those people know Opie and Anthony. So if Anthony had if he was a name like Alex Jones,
Yeah.
he would be despised among everybody. If more people knew who Anthony Cumia was, he would be in a shit ton of trouble every single day. But he just isn't, because not many people know about him. That's what it is. It's just exposure.
Yeah, you know what? That's a good point, because it like, if it wasn't for this podcast that you produced, and then afterwards I did my research on Opie and Anthony individually, I would have never knew that Anthony actually has his, Live at the Compound, and one of the people that he constantly has on his platform is the former founding member of the Proud Boys.
Yeah.
So
Gavin is his name?
Yeah,
right?
Gavin McInnes, unfortunately, yes.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Well, like I said, I don't want to get too much into that, but one of the interesting things that I noticed in the Remembering Patrice O'Neal episode that you did, and I thought it was a great tribute to him as well. So congratulations to that. It's so funny how everything is in hindsight 2020, because that episode came out in 2019, I believe, and we're now in 2023. But back then, you mentioned something that Patrice O'Neal said, and when he was discussing about Hollywood and how it's like prison and it's a beast and so on and so forth, and he said that Will Smith is not as talented as many people think. It's just that he knows how to behave.
Yeah.
You fast forward to now, where he slaps the fuck out of Chris Rock.
Yep.
It makes me wonder, like, if Patrice O'Neal was still alive, what would he say about that now? There's so many things that have happened since his passing that it makes me interested to know what he would say about it. You're
100%.
absolutely right about that.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, when he died, one of the things that Anthony said, because they had their episode where it was basically a eulogy for Patrice O'Neal.
Yeah.
With all their favorite comedians. It's a phenomenal fucking
I
broadcast.
got a chance to listen to it also. Yeah.
Oh, it's amazing.
Yeah.
And one of the things that Anthony said is, he said the weird thing is that I want to hear Patrice's take on his death.
Yeah.
And he said the
I
most
remember
heartbreaking thing about his death is that you won't get his opinions in the future. Like when things happen, you can't just say, "Oh, what's Patrice going to say about that?" Because now we just don't have that. And that would be something he ate up. He would talk about Will Smith slapping Chris Rock for 10 hours straight, and you would listen to every single point he had to say, and it would be something interesting that you've never ever considered or heard of. And it would, even if you disagreed with him, that was his power, is he was able to fascinate you with his opinions. And that episode about when he was talking about Hollywood and how it's this crazy beast.
Yeah.
For like an hour, I think he was talking about it. I really believe that that's something that everybody should listen to if you want to get into entertainment in any way, because that's not something that's not in the handbook to being a filmmaker, to being a storyteller, even just to working on film sets. I mean, if you want to be like a gaffer or something like that, that's not something they teach you in film school, is how much of a beast this business is and how it eats you up and shits you out, and how it's all about like gangs. I mean, it's prison mentality.
Yeah.
And to hear someone like Patrice O'Neal break that down, and it's not even like an opinion piece. I mean, like if I was telling you about this, it's not. I mean, what is my opinion worth? Because I'm not in that business. You know what I mean? But Patrice O'Neal was on the ride several times. He was in a lot of Spike Lee movies. He was in The Office. Like, he's been on the ride.
Yeah.
He knows what he's talking about when it comes to that, or he did know what he was talking about. So hearing him with no filter describe what Hollywood is actually like, not the glitz and glamour, not working with Brad Pitt, not going on Jimmy Fallon's show, but what it's actually like, what it's like to get that money and deal with these people. I can't think of something that's more poignant and more what's the word? Like knowledgeable? No, like a teaching tool, like a lesson.
Yeah.
There's so much to learn from that episode. And him in general, it's insane.
Yeah. And what the fascinating thing about Patrice O'Neal too is the fact that, especially a comedian for his time, he was, even back then he was controversial, and I can't imagine what it would be like in the climate that we live in now, where everything is like it can be easily canceled.
Yeah.
Like I remember when in his last stand-up, he made a joke. I thought it was really funny about like, ladies, why can't I harass you? Like he's trying to make it sounds so bad, but he's trying to make a point that kind of weirdly makes sense in something, and I kind of think to myself, like, if that joke were to happen in 2022, would he be able to get past it because of how he explained it and the way his art is? Or do you think that he would just be another victim of cancel culture?
I really don't. It's interesting. Patrice O'Neal is one of those guys that, because of the way he explained it and because of how he backed himself up,
yeah,
he didn't just say it and then go, "What? I'm just being funny." Like he provided a reason why he was saying it. So I don't know. I think if he was alive today, it's hard to say. It's interesting because there are people like Louis C.K. before we found out that he did what he did.
Yeah.
His comedy never really got him in trouble. Not like to the point where he was canceled.
That's true. That is very true.
And he was probably the most taboo comedian, but he never really got in enormous amounts of trouble for his comedy.
Exactly. I mean, I remember in his set, he would use the N-word, and I don't remember anybody trying to cancel him.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think if Patrice O'Neal was alive today, there would be bloggers out there that would discover old tapes of him on Opie and Anthony, of his old stand-up, and they'd probably take offense to it and write articles or whatever. But I think that he is canceled. He's unflappable because he wouldn't back down. He wouldn't apologize. He wouldn't say, I will back away and think about what I did. He would just double down and keep telling jokes. But the thing that scares me is that I'm curious that if he was still alive, if he would just become one of the comedians that goes on Joe Rogan's podcast every week and complains about it, which I don't think he would, because he wasn't just screaming into the void. He had a legitimate stance and an opinion that no one else had. But it's interesting to ponder, like, would he turn into that old hat comedian where it's like, oh, I just want to say whatever I want. Why don't they let me? You know what I mean?
Well, there's one thing that I learned from Patrice, and especially from watching that documentary that you mentioned on Remembering Patrice O'Neal, Killing Is Easy.
Yeah.
They were talking about in the documentary about how one of the reasons why he wasn't a bigger star that he was meant to be was because he didn't want to play along with the game. He didn't want to be a part of the system. Like, we only know him from Web Junk 2.0 or, these small things. He could have been a bigger star, but he just didn't want to be a student of the game. Like, he didn't want to play along. He didn't want to do this. He want to do that. And then the sad part about it also is that it wasn't until he actually grew up and matured a little bit more that he was willing to loosen up a bit. And if he actually had just stayed a little bit healthier, or if he just didn't pass away, period, there's a really good chance that he actually could have been a lot more successful than he was. Not to say that he was a failure or anything like that, but I just think that he didn't realize his real potential. Maybe it could have been from the prison story, or maybe because he felt like he was against the system, his back was against the wall no matter what. But it was, to me, it's just oddly fascinating. But one thing, kind of going back to Opie and Anthony, though, one thing that we can agree on, and you've listened to a lot more than I have, but based on the things that I've listened to and I've watched, you're absolutely right. There's no way in hell that a show like that could be made in this day and age.
No.
I mean, there's no way in hell that you could do, I got to tell you, man, I actually discovered this earlier this week, that episode where Bobo thinks he's going to go on a first date and then they screw with him. That is so. You know what? You know how they say, I feel like I'm going to go to hell for saying this.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm going to go to hell just for listening to it, because that episode made me feel so dirty, but so oddly enough, I find myself laughing and I hate myself because I'm laughing at this.
Yeah, and that's why. I mean, it's back in the early 2000s and the late 90s, and the show like Opie and Anthony, when it was, the gimmick was that they're shocking. I mean, they're shock jocks. So like every day they would do something crazy. They would have women come in, they would be naked, they would pour syrup on them and shit like that. Yeah. And that was the gimmick. But now we've seen that gimmick. Mm-hmm. So it's not even like we're more sensitive. It's just like that modern audiences just don't want to see that. because that's the public perception to what we want to see and what we want to listen to has changed. And so back then we wanted to hear it because no one else was doing that except for maybe Howard Stern and Morton Downey Jr.
Ron and Fez. Maybe.
And Ron and Fez. Yeah. But like Opie and Anthony they were the ones that just they were giant children essentially.
Yeah.
And no one wants to listen to giant children anymore. You know, they want like people want interesting like this. They want first class, second place podcasts.
Thank you very much.
So I don't know it could never ever exist today, Opie and Anthony.
No,
the way that it did.
But you know what? If hypothetically, if they did. If they happen to do something like that, and even though it would get in trouble, I feel like I come from that era where I understand this kind of humor. Like I come from an era where, you know, I listen to Howard Stern. I know the comedy that Opie and Anthony were doing. I know the comedy that Louis C.K. was doing. Like like I understand that it would get canceled now in this day and age, but I feel like I come from the era where I understand it's not that really that serious as people depict it to be.
Right, and I agree with you to a certain extent, and I think that if Opie and Anthony continued, if Anthony was never fired, and if they continued the trajectory that they were going, I think they would be okay. I don't think that I think the show would still be, if they could somehow find a common ground and get along enough to put the show on.
Even with the eggshell walk, because I don't know, I feel like the eggshell walk was going to be the result was going to be inevitable no matter what.
Yeah, I think with the relationship between them, I don't think it could have continued.
Right.
But if it just say they were best friends, just like for this hypothetical, just imagine they wanted to keep doing it.
Oh, okay, in that aspect, yeah.
Yeah, and then if Anthony never got fired, and if the Opie and Anthony show continued exactly the way it was going in 2014 or 2013, would it still be around? Would people have a problem with it? And it's interesting because the show changed and morphed so much that by the late 2000s, it wasn't about shocking anymore. It wasn't about stomping on a homeless man's cake. It was just about like, look, I don't know, this like George Carlin is in studio. Let's just talk to him.
Yeah.
And we don't have questions prepared. We didn't even like know he was coming in today. But sit down. Let's just bullshit.
Yeah.
It's like we have an astronaut in the next room. Let's just talk to him. Right. And that was what was special about Opie and Anthony, is what it became. Like it's interesting to study the beginnings of that show and where they started, but I think what cemented it as one of the greatest like radio shows and the greatest entertainment shows is what it eventually would become. And I think that if they kept morphing and changing with the times, I think they would be fine.
Yeah.
I really think that.
And I also got to say that I think that the story of them is a cautionary tale. And the reason I say that is because I've told people before on this podcast that I was always looking for somebody to be my permanent co-host. And it didn't work out that way in the beginning. And I knew somebody that would be down to do it, but unfortunately I feel like it would be a situation like Opie and Anthony, because this friend that I have that would be down to do it actually has that same kind of Arrested Development mentality where they don't want to ever get married, they don't want to have kids, they just want to fuck this and that and just like live this life, this really lifestyle. And I'm not about that. Like as bad as this sounds, I feel like I relate more to Opie because I'm not married or have any kids, but I look at myself as that family man. I look at the guy that steers the ship. Is that the phrase that Opie and Anthony fans call it?
Yeah, that's the meme.
Yeah, okay.
Steers the ship.
I actually feel, I kind of feel kind of dirty that I feel like I could be sympathetic with Opie, and I feel like a lot of Opie and Anthony fans would hate me for saying this because I feel like I sympathize them in a way. Like I feel like if I was in either one of their shoes, I would be in Opie's shoes because I would steer the ship. I don't know if I would go about some of the things that he did, like as far as like the eggshell walk. I don't think I would be as sensitive like if somebody was poking fun at me and anything like that. I'm comfortable in my own skin, but I just feel like I would be that if I did a radio show, I would be that Opie type, as much as I hate to say that.
No, and I totally understand that sentiment because that's another thing that's so interesting about the Opie and Anthony story is how much you can really see yourself in all of these people. Like I have been Opie before, I've been Anthony before, I've been Jim Norton. I understand where all of them are coming from, and it's not that any one of them are wrong or right. It's just that they're human beings, and after 20 years, it's like they started to hate each other, which of course that makes sense. But I understand that. I think I sort of agree with you too. That out of the three of them, I sympathize with Opie. I understand why people, in the same way that I get why Staten Island has a bad reputation.
Yeah.
I understand why Opie has the reputation he does. I get why people don't like him. I understand why but also one thing that it's just I want to make perfectly clear is that just because the internet doesn't agree with something, it doesn't mean that I have to then like fall in line with it. Like if the internet doesn't like Opie and they've given me every reason, that doesn't mean that I then also have to hate the man.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like I understand why. I get you've given me the reasons why you do not like him, but I'll form my own opinion.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And Marv, let me ask you this question real quick, if I could. One of the reasons why Opie and Anthony kind of failed, like at the beginning of it, was because Anthony decided to bring his girlfriend to the studio all the time and everything and so on and so forth. If you had your own radio show, or basically what you're doing right now, if you had a partner that you work with constantly and they started bringing their girlfriend, their wife constantly, wouldn't that fucking piss you off as well? Right. Right, but that's my point though. It doesn't have to be like a wife or a side chick or anything like that. It's simply because you're not respecting the process. It's almost like, you know that saying, "Don't shit where you eat." Why are you bringing this to your place of work, so to speak?
Right.
Yeah. So, but no, like, so with that being said, and the reason I asked Marv that, and I think you would lose your shit as well if something like that happened. Is
sure.
Like at the end of the day, guys like us, we're passionate about what we do, and I feel like somebody like Anthony was just somebody that feel like he just won the lottery, so he could do whatever the hell he wanted.
Yeah, and now imagine someone in Opie's position where he built this thing, he became the voice of Long Island radio, and then he brings on a partner, Anthony, and now they have a good thing going, but then like maybe, I don't know, a year into their relationship, suddenly Anthony brings in someone else. And I think that is the perfect explanation as to the relationship between Opie and Anthony, was that they were both wrong in this scenario. Like Anthony was wrong for constantly bringing his girlfriend and being like, "What? It's all right. We're just fucking around. Who cares? She's just sitting there, And then, but Opie was wrong for how he handled it.
Oh yeah, no, there's no denying that. Even Opie will admit that what he did was wrong. How he went about it.
Right. And so that's a perfect, because that just kept happening like year after year after year, is that something would happen, neither one of them would react as like very well to it, and then they would just blow up at each other. It's like brothers. I mean, that's exactly what it's like. And so like I understand where Opie was coming from in that moment, and then I understand where Anthony was coming from, where it's like, I mean, now, like, have you ever started dating someone new and you brought them around to, like, you're excited to meet them, for them to meet your best friends or something, and then like she meets someone that you thought they were going to get along, but then he just doesn't, just like gives her the cold shoulder, and then it's almost embarrassing. Like you have to explain to your, you know what I mean?
I mean, I'll admit to you, I've actually been the other person. I've actually the person that has been disrespectful.
Really?
Yeah, and I actually, one of the things that I take pride in this show is that I like to give a piece of myself every episode and tell people and peel the curtain back and tell them about myself, and whether for better or worse. But yeah, and I guess we'll do this in this episode, but that's been the thing about me. I mean, I've had my moments where I've been unproud of myself for what I did, and yeah, there was maybe a moment where maybe a friend of mine brought a girlfriend over, or even a family member, and I didn't think too highly of them, and the way that I handled it was not very, very mature. It wasn't right, and I'm in some form, me being a person that already has a guilt complex as it is, I'm endlessly ashamed about that.
Yeah.
So that, I guess that's why I feel sympathetic towards Opie with that, and I actually think it's big of him that he actually owned up to it.
Yeah. That I think even in '99 he realized he was wrong and he apologized and they talked about it, and then that's one of those things where, I mean, like Anthony and that girl, what was her name, Melinda,
yeah,
like they broke up, you know what I mean, like that. So it was in the past. So I think that was one of those things that it was just a spat in the long career of the two of them, but neither one of them ever really got over it. It was always in the back of their mind, this fight.
Unfortunately, it's a part of their history.
Yeah, it's like they were best friends for like 4 years, like best friends, that they would hang out every day and call each other and talk about the show, and then they would hang out with their girlfriends, and they would become a quartet for 4 years. It was amazing, and then suddenly one big gnarly fight happens that like it signals the end of the show. But then they get over it and they apologize. But still, it's never going to be the same after
It's almost
that.
like I'll forgive, but I won't forget.
Right. Is that we're best friends, but there's also this thing.
Yeah, like we're still best friends, but I'll still remember what you did. Like I saw a little bit of your true colors there.
Exactly. And it was never the same after that.
Right. Did you ever get a chance to ever meet Opie Anthony or even Jim?
No. I know people who have worked on the show. I know people who know them, but I've never I've never met or spoken to any of them.
How would you feel if any one of them heard your podcast?
I'd be tremendously complimented.
How do you think they would take it?
It's interesting too. That was the one thing that was in my mind when I was making the podcast, is that I was excited to tell the story, but the lingering feeling was, well, what if they hear it? What if Opie hears it and takes offense to what I said? What if Anthony disagrees? What if they try to get the podcast taken off? Like, what's going to happen? I think that I've put a lot of thought into this. I think Jim Norton would be fine with it, because there have been many talking point videos made. There's a full-length video on YouTube about him called "The Worm Has Turned," and it's about it's like a 2-hour documentary about how Jim Norton's a piece of shit. I'm pretty sure it's made tongue-in-cheek. Like, it's not supposed to be. It's like an in-joke between the people who hate Opie and Anthony and Jim Norton. I think I've never really can tell with those fans, but. So anyway, I think Jim Norton would be okay with the podcast. I think Opie really wouldn't give a shit. Like, I mean, one thing I left out of the podcast is that when Anthony shit on him for that like hour and a half on his podcast that he called Walking on Greg Shells.
Yes.
Opie did not listen to that. He said on the radio, he goes, listen, I don't have time, so I had people who listened to it and they took their notes. So like, I know what Anthony said, but he didn't listen to it. So I think that if like Opie could be told by his goons that like, there's a podcast about you and Anthony and like the history, you should listen to it. And he said, oh, that's cool, but I really don't think he would care. I think Anthony would probably, he would like the good parts and then he wouldn't like the bad or the true parts. Like when I mention how,
he's sensitive.
Yeah, I really do believe that. I think once he heard that I'm talking about him making the music video for Gonna Electric Shock OJ.
Yeah, because of you, I actually saw that and I couldn't even finish it. I felt uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's really bad.
It's bad. It is bad.
Because I looked it up. I didn't know. I only heard it on Opie's show. So I looked up the actual recorded song and I saw that video and I went, oh my God. And then none of the comments are calling him out.
I couldn't finish it.
It's insane.
I know. Yeah. You know what's funny? Like, and Marv, you'll actually appreciate this too. It's one of the things that I've learned about life, especially most recently, is I love how things. It's such a small world, and things, even small intricacies, can be interconnected. So, with that being said, a person that I've had in your seat before on the show is a gentleman by the name of Joe Beningo, who is a very popular sports radio show host. He's retired now. He has his own podcast, but for anybody who is a diehard New York sports fan, they know who he is, for the last 25-ish type of years. He was actually on a podcast one time, and the host of that podcast used to be an intern for Opie and Anthony. Okay. And he said that Jim Norton, and since you're such a Opie and Anthony historian, maybe you know this story or not, that Jim Norton said on the air. He said that Jim Norton would actually be looking for hookers while listening to Joe Beningo's radio show in the overnights.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I don't know if you ever heard Jim Norton actually tell that story, but I just find myself like I'm actually picturing in my head Jim Norton actually looking for transvestites or whatever, and you hear Joe Beningo in the background raving about how the Jets fucking lost again. And I just find it interesting because I had the man in this seat that you're in right now on the show, and here I am talking to somebody who is from a different world, but it's still interconnected some way, shape, or form. I don't know if that makes sense to you. I don't know if I just went on a tangent, but
it makes perfect sense. It's so strange how life works out that way, like the interconnecting paths. Right. Especially in this part of like where we live. Because I think there's a lot of people in the tri-state area that just like, I mean, we all kind of know each other, and we all look out for each other.
And the internet has made it even more palpable than ever, you know?
Yeah, 100%.
I mean, maybe there was, in some universe, if social media or the internet didn't existed, I think maybe there was still some way, shape, or form that you and me would have crossed paths.
Oh, yeah.
But I just think the internet just accelerated it.
Yeah, 1,000%. And it's really interesting to think about. I can't believe you had that guy on your show. That's so funny.
I didn't even bring it up to him, but I don't know. Maybe I'll bring it up to him some other day, but maybe that's not something he was interested in discussing. But
Did he mention Opie and Anthony at all?
The Joe Beningo?
Yeah.
No. He's I don't mean this in a bad way at all, because I love the guy. He's just a guy in his own world. Like he's focused on his life, his family, his sports, and that's it. You know, he doesn't strike me as a typical radio guy. Like he's just a guy that got lucky and got fortunate to get into the radio business. It's not something that he was looking to get into when he was younger. It was just something he fell into and made a hell of a career out of it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe he knows of Jim Norton. Maybe he's heard the story once or twice, but I don't think he ever listened. I know he was a Don Imus fan for sure. That's for sure.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. That's really funny.
Yeah. But no. But either way, ladies and gentlemen, even if you're not fans of Opie and Anthony or have never even heard of Opie and Anthony, I highly recommend it. Not only because it's a fascinating story, but I think you guys got to give props to how this guy produced it. He did his research. He did his homework. You could tell that he was very passionate about it, and I felt the passion behind it. And you know, I learned a lot from that podcast. And I'm not even lying to you when I've said that I've listened to it on multiple occasions, not because of the story itself, but you know, it's just entertaining. The story is crazy and everything, but maybe I'm just weird this way, but I'm just fascinated about how really well produced that thing is and how much time and work that you did on that. And I just wanted to let you know that it didn't go in vain.
Thank you. Jeez, I very much appreciate that.
You're welcome, man. So before we close out, you got any other projects lined up with Purple Cloud or even just, you know, Matt Provenzano projects?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm always working on something. So I had a litany of podcasts that I wanted to try out, like and more stories that I wanted to tell. But I think that's something that I want to, that should take a backseat for now. That's not like the story that I want to tell right now.
Yeah, well, you're still young, man. You got plenty of time.
Yeah, so that's just what I like to do, is make stuff. Right. So it's when the time is right, I'll get back into podcasting. And maybe Opie and Anthony, maybe they'll do something interesting. I'll make another episode. I always said I wouldn't make another episode of Shock Jocks unless one of them gets murdered or something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, to put it lightly.
And so the only thing I want to promote right now is I made a documentary called Welcome to the Theater.
Yes, I saw the trailer for that. Yes, I'm sorry. Please continue.
Yeah, so it's about an old dilapidated theater on Staten Island that's filled with mold and bugs and spiders and shit. But actors work there and people go to see shows. And so it's a short documentary. It's 25 minutes long, but it's about figuring out why. Like, what's the special?
What's the mystic behind it? Like,
yeah, why do people keep going? And I'm so tremendously proud of it. And it's premiering live on YouTube for one time. I don't know when this is released, but it's going to be on YouTube Friday, January 27th at 8 p.m. on the Purple Cloud YouTube channel. So you could follow that on Instagram. And then after, if you can't make it, if there's any reason, Welcome to the Theater will be showing in film festivals throughout the year. And then at the end of the year, it'll be back on YouTube.
Ironically, looking at my schedule, this episode will be released on the same day.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, so there you go.
Awesome.
Well, it works out.
If you got nothing to do today, tonight.
Yeah, after this, go in and check it out. Right.
Perfect. 8 p.m. on the Purple Cloud YouTube channel. It's premiering live, along with 2 other short films. I love this fucking stuff.
Marv's the man, man. Marv is the fucking man.
Thank you, Marv, for everything you do.
They don't call him the king of podcast on Instagram for nothing. Yeah. All right, so we're about to close out this episode a little bit. Thanks so much for coming through, Matt. I really appreciate it. But before we go, there's a question that I ask everybody at the end of the show, but I think I'm going to flip it this time around.
Okay.
So the question that I ask everybody that comes on my show at the end is, if they were to make a movie on your life, which actor would you like to see portray your character and why? However, for you, I feel like I need to flip it a little bit.
Okay.
Because you're a filmmaker and you know, you're doing everything to achieve your passion, and you know, I think that people could take a note from your book about, you know, doing what you love and being passionate about. Mm-hmm. So you are out there with your film crew. You are directing. Who is your dream actor or actress that you would love to film?
That I would direct?
Yes, that you would direct. Excuse me.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Bryan Cranston.
Awesome.
Yeah, Bryan Cranston.
I love it. I love it. Breaking Bad is my favorite show of all time.
Yeah.
Bryan Cranston's fucking amazing. I love it. That is awesome. And I don't even need to ask why. I mean, it's self-explanatory.
Yeah, if you need to know why, just go watch the episode of Breaking Bad when he's in the crawl space screaming.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, holy shit.
Yeah.
Bryan Cranston's one of those actors where it's like, I don't even need to be in the room. It's like, okay, I've given you the script, now have fun, goodbye. Like, do your job. He's just...
And he's an actor's actor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's just fucking amazing.
He's awesome, bro. Yeah. Shout out to Bryan Cranston. Shout out to everybody here at Breaking Bad.
Yeah, for sure, man.
Yeah. All right, ladies and gentlemen, well, that's going to do it for this episode of First Class, Second Place. I want to thank my guest, Matt Provenzano, for coming through here. Thank you so much, man. This has been an honor, pleasure, all of that.
Thank you for having
Anybody
me.
you want to give a shout out to before we close out?
Shout out to my parents, mom and dad. Shout out to my brother Dominic, my sister-in-law Nicole, my beautiful, lovely girlfriend Camila, and everybody that I know and love. I love all of you. Thanks for listening.
All right. And where can they find you on social media and on YouTube?
You can find me on Matt Provenzano 5 on Instagram. You can find like Purple Cloud and all the stuff like that, because that has a separate Instagram. I have a website, mattprovenzano.com, and then purplecloudentertainment.com. And then other than that, if you want to listen to Shock Jocks, if you haven't, you can go to shockjockspodcast.com, and it's available wherever you get your podcasts.
Love it. All right. Thank you very much, Matt. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for watching this episode of First Class, Second Place. You can find me at Enrique _ on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. And don't forget to follow the First Class, Second Place podcast page on Instagram as well. And don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube, Jason Enrique. This has been the First Class, Second Place podcast. We out.
Bye, everybody.